Coming up on the DRS Train podcast.
In Formula One, you don't ask how much it costs, you just ask how fast you want to go. That's all. The team started to decline, honestly. Oh, well, yeah, I mean, each good racing driver is a fast driver, but not each fast driver is a good racing driver. And I told him, Kimi, Raikkonen, he drove like a madman. Of course, Helmut Marko didn't like that. Nothing was perfect, so it was a bit of a disappointment for him. But he did very, very well, for sure, very well.
This is the DRS Train.
Welcome to the DRS Train podcast. We hope you've had a Merry Christmas. The holidays are always special, and we're pleased to present a very special guest today. We have a legend of motorsport, Jacky and Jenson, has joined us. Goes by Jacky. Jacky's career spans nearly every corner of motorsport, from racing in categories himself to Peugeot, Prost, Sauber, Honda, HRT, even WEC. So to give our listeners a sense of the incredible body of work, he's actually worked with the likes of Raikkonen, Massa, Aïello, Alesi, I believe Della Rosa, and many more. So you're one of the few people, Jacky, who's lived inside almost every kind of motorsport operation. Truly incredible. So welcome to the podcast.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And you trained as a mechanical engineer at KU Leuven.
Yeah.
You raced in Formula 4 and Formula 3, and you spent, I believe, around 4 years in Ford's engine development department in your early career. So how did those three strands, the education, the driving, and the OEM engineering, overlap in practice? And which one really shaped how you thought about performance?
Well, to be honest, education was for sure very important to obtain a degree of engineering, mechanical engineering. And I always was interested in motorsport from a young kid always, because I went once with my father to the motor show in Brussels, and there was a car exposed. I can't remember which one exactly that won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and it was there with full of dust of the winning of Le Mans, still not cleaned after the race. And I was impressed by that, so I got more and more interested in motorsports. And I think therefore also I went for the studies of engineer, because I was interested more in motorsport than in anything else. And finally I had my degree of engineering. I thought I must learn something about the practical side. And because when I was a young kid, I never raced karting, but I drove cars from the year of 10, 11 onwards. So I could drive a little bit, because as a kid, you learn understeer and oversteer, you make a spin, you prepare your engines, so you prepare your car. So after my first job as an engineer, I put some money on the side, and I bought a second-hand Formula Ford. And I went for track days just to learn about different setups, what the influence was of the car balance and so on. And for sure, I mean, my friends who went with me to help me a bit with taking the car off the trailer, on the trailer. They took the lap times. And then they said, yeah, but look, your lap times, you're only 0.2 of a second slower than the guy who won the race last weekend and so on. And they convinced me to take a license and to go on racing. So then I went a bit of racing in Formula Ford. Not complete seasons, because I had no time and no money for that. But that's how I started racing, basically. And at the beginning, Formula Ford was okay, because I could win a couple of races. So it was quite good. And but for sure, when you go on after Formula Ford, Formula 3 and so on, it becomes a very high level. And I never had the time and the money to do it properly. So I did it more for experience than actually my idea was not to become a racing driver, more a race engineer, basically, but with experience.
So obviously back in the 1980s, it was quite a different kind of environment in motorsports in general compared to how the kind of current Formula 1 and single-seater drivers race. So when you were racing in Formula Ford and Formula 3 as a privateer, what did that actually look like in terms of things like budget and team structure and the competitiveness of the other drivers? And did having, because you mentioned it as well, about having limited resources, did that change the way you later approached problems as an engineer?
For sure. I mean, in those days, motorsport was much less professional than today. When I raced in Formula Ford, we went to the track with a car with a trailer, Formula Ford on the trailer, the tires in the car, on the back seat. And my mechanics were just a few friends who came with me to help me out. So it was not really a professional team, for sure. But the level was lower than today, that is for sure. If today you come into a paddock of, let's say, Formula 4, you see the big trailers, big teams, lots of mechanics, engineers. And that was not the case in my time when I started racing Formula 4 in the early 80s, that is for sure. So motorsport, in general, all sports changed a lot, I think, and became more and more professional. So nowadays, if you want to become a racing driver or whatever, or a professional cycler or a professional footballer, you have to start as a young kid and sacrifice your youth for that, basically. In my days, I think a good gentleman driver still could win some races. That's not the case anymore today, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. So after all of your early escapades, after Ford and all that sort of stuff, you became the head of the technical department at Champions European, the Champions European operation, before moving into team management in '85, I believe.
Yeah.
Was that the moment where you consciously shifted from being an engineer to leading engineers, to leading the step? And what did that teach you in the next step of your career?
Well, it was interesting because, as you said there, I was the leader of a team with engineer and mechanics. It was not a racing team, but it was a team with, we have engine dynos and electrician engineers and so on. And so I learned how to manage technical people to achieve a certain goal, which is the same thing, of course, afterwards in motor racing. And with my motor racing experience, which was, let's say, complementary on that, I learned how to manage a team, basically. Yeah.
And I suppose you're in quite a unique position because you did racing before going into engineering, which doesn't happen that often. So how much did being a driver help you understand car behavior when it came to designing and working on cars?
Well, I think quite a lot, because I always felt drivers understood very quickly that I knew about what I was talking, when we spoke about car balance and things like that and car stability. And as they understand that you know what they mean, they trust you very, very quickly. And it brings a good relationship between the driver and his race engineers. And that is very important, because it has to be a relationship of mutual confidence, and because they felt that I knew not only from the textbooks and the scientific books, but also from the practical side, that I was talking about things they understood, and I understood them. And this was very important, I think, to become a reasonably good race engineer, let's say. Yeah.
So then in 1994, you went to Peugeot Sport, and you were part of Laurent Aïello's touring car program. And obviously, he's a legend of touring cars, of his titles in DTM and French touring cars and all of that. People often say he was one of the best drivers to never race in Formula One. From your perspective, how good was he really?
Well, Laurent was a very, very, very talented driver, for sure. We won together the championship in '94. And in '94 was also the first year that Peugeot built the Formula One engine for McLaren, driven by Mika Häkkinen and Martin Brundle. As a test driver was Jan Magnussen. And I had a deal with Ron Dennis. He said, if Laurent, I told him that Laurent was a very, very fast driver. I said, if Laurent wins the championship, the French championship of touring cars, you can have a Formula One test with him. Because in that year, as the French championship was only 12 races in France, I had a lot of time left over. And the director of Peugeot Sport was Jean-Pierre Jabouille, ex-Formula One driver also. And Jean-Pierre sent me a lot to tests and races with McLaren. So in that year, I combined the French Touring Car Championship with tests and races with McLaren. And so by the end of the year, Laurent won the championship, and then we had a test proposed in Estoril. And so we basically went then to Estoril. But the thing is, Laurent was not prepared for that properly. because touring cars have nearly no downforce, and so his neck was not prepared to. For sure, the old history was very, very harsh for the neck. You had the last corner, which was a parabolic corner, 180 degrees, very fast. And the two first corners also very fast, the right-hander. So the neck suffered quite a lot. And so the reference driver there was Mika Hakkinen. And then we had the three sectors of the track, and the middle sector, which is a very twisty sector, with not high-speed corners, but very twisty sector. In the middle sector, Laurent was even quicker than Hakkinen, so it was very, very good. But the total lap time was not there because he could not keep his head straight in high-speed corners. His head turned to the outside of the corner. He had to lift off the throttle, of course. But I think he was really fast enough for sure to win Formula One races with a proper race car. Yeah, that is for sure.
So obviously, yeah. Karen?
No, I was just I wanted to just emphasize that's so impressive, and it just makes us wonder how many great drivers didn't actually, race in F1, even though they clearly had the talent to, because we always think that the best drivers always make it to F1, but I think Jacky, your story kind of emphasizes that there are so many talented drivers out there, right? It's just it's unfortunate. Peter, please continue.
So obviously, as we all know, Aïello never made it to Formula One, but you did through Peugeot, because from then you went on to work and become a sort of link between Jordan and Peugeot.
Yes.
A role that sounds sort of a mixture of political, technical, and cultural. So what did your job actually entail with them?
Well, the thing is that, let's say, if you build the best Formula One chassis in the wind tunnel and the best Formula One engine on the dyno, they do not fit together. So to make a winning car, you need to impose some compromises from both parts, on the chassis side and on the engine side. And this was basically my job, to impose those kind of compromises, both on the engine side at Peugeot and on the chassis side with Gary Anderson at Jordan Grand Prix.
So Jacky, I mean, I think, that's fascinating. But if we talk Peugeot here bluntly,
yeah,
I love the Peugeot brand growing up. My parents had a Peugeot car at one point when we lived in Italy. It's a wonderful car. And it was a bit shocking because sometimes it looked like the engine was a little bit underpowered, unreliable even sometimes, even if the engineering was so impressive. So I'm just wondering, what's the truth here? From the inside, how accurate is that assessment of Peugeot? And, what really was the quality of the engines from your perspective?
Well, from my perspective, let's say in '94, the first year they built the Formula One engine, the engine was for sure not very powerful and not very reliable. For sure not, because to give an example, in 1994, so the first year of the Formula One engine from Peugeot with McLaren, in those days we had only 16 Grand Prix per year. It's not a lot for sure compared to today. But on those 16 Grand Prix, they finished 8 times, so 1 race on 2 on the podium, which is not too bad. But for sure, the engine was not very powerful and not very reliable. That is for sure. Then in '95, the engine was already faster, but not reliable. Then in '96, the reliability became quite good and the power level also. And in '97, I think the engine was really reliable and powerful. It never won a race. It could have won normally with Fisichella in Hockenheim, I think, in '97, but we did not, so it didn't win a race. And the only thing I would say in '97 what lacked a bit compared to the Renault V10 was the drivability. So it was very powerful, it was reliable, it was not very drivable. So the torque curve was quite bumpy, let's say, which make it difficult for the drivers to control the spinning of the rear wheels, accelerating out of the low speed corners. Yeah. But okay, it could have gone progressing in the right direction, but then it did not anymore after '97 because of the whole political story with the French Prost team,
And we're gonna get to that right now. I just wanted to add to your comment. I'm amazed that Prost didn't win a race in '97. I mean, I think it's very unlucky that they didn't, because first of all, I thought the driver lineup was strong even before Panis broke his legs, right? And the car was super quick, and the engine, like you said, okay, some drivability and the low speed, but that Prost car in '97, Jacky, was a super quick car from the outside. That's what it looked like.
In '97, the Prost car still used the Mugen Honda engine. It was only from '98 they used the Peugeot engine. Because '97 was still a Jordan.
Sorry, I meant to say, so you're right. So in '98 as well, so the driver lineup in '98 was what, Panis and Trulli, I think, right?
Yep.
And so I thought the car was also quite good at some rate. I mean, Trulli came second 1 year. Actually, no, that was the year after. But I mean, in '98 there were some good moments as well. I mean, well, let's talk about '98 quickly. I mean, do you think the car could have done even more than it showed? Because again, I thought I
think the '98 car was not very high level, let's say, because the Ligier team was sold some years before to Flavio Briatore and Tom Hawkinshaw, and Flavio was running the Benetton team in those days. And basically the GS45 Ligier for '97 with the Mugen Honda engine was basically a Benetton car which had the Mugen Honda engine instead of the Renault V10 engine, but it was basically a Benetton car.
Okay.
And therefore, to make as much money as possible, I guess, from Flavio's side, the engineering team was really reduced to a very, very, very small design team. And basically, when Alain bought the team, so in '97 they ran GS45, which was basically the Benetton car with a Honda Mugen engine. Then in '98 they built their own car, so no parts coming from Benetton anymore. But there was no design team. There was in the drawing office were 10 people, and you need like 100 people to design a proper Formula One car. So, and therefore the team was really too small to build in a short time a good Formula One car. And the '98 car was lacking downforce, lacking aerodynamic efficiency, was overweight, so it was not a very good car.
And yeah, the Prost team, it was it got a lot of attention at the time to see a team run by Alain Prost, and I think there was a lot of hope of success, but it never really came in the end. But yeah, what was the engineering culture like at Prost?
Well, yeah, like I said, the '98 car, the team was really too small to build a proper Formula One car in short notice. So the '98 car was not very, very powerful, not very successful. And then the '99 car was already a little bit better because the team moved from the factory at Magny-Cours to a factory close to Paris. So a lot of engineers were hired in, a lot of mechanics, technicians, and so on. So the team was improving. So the '99 car was already a little bit better than the '98 car. It scored some points from time to time, and in those days to score points, you had to be in the top 6, of course, not like today in the top 10. It was more difficult. And I think Trulli finished
the podium in '99, of course, with Trulli, right? It was amazing.
Yeah. So it was already a bit better, not a top car at all, but it was already a bit better. And then after that, well, I left the team at the end of '99, but in 2000, I think the team started to decline, honestly, because of whatever financial reasons, maybe political reasons. Was a lot of stuff involved in the Peugeot wanted to get out of Formula One, so there was no motivation anymore. The budgets were restricted, and then you cannot do anything in Formula One.
Because I believe that Prost, he famously said that creating that team was one of the biggest regrets of his career, because obviously he was amazingly successful driver, 4-time champion, I think criminally underrated. But what was he actually like as a boss and how he ran the team?
Well, he was for sure. He was a boss, a bit like he was a driver. He was a perfectionist on everything, and nothing was perfect. So it was a bit of a disappointment for him, and he could not move it quickly like he would have liked it, because there were too much political reasons why the team could not work properly. And I think he was very disappointed in that. And at the end, the team disappeared because it was not possible to run a team in those conditions. Honestly, no. That's why also I left at the end of '99. I only stayed for 2 years because I saw it was no future in there, and so that I left. No.
And that makes a lot of sense to us. I mean, what we're a little bit curious about here is exactly how much did the French government affect things? I mean, were there layers of bureaucracy basically above the team that were negatively impacting the performance? Just trying to get a better sense of exactly what those forces were from the government.
Difficult to say, but there were influences from everywhere for sure. And I think also Peugeot, after the first year with McLaren and then the 3 years with Jordan, they thought, well, Alain Prost is the god. I mean, and of course, when he bought the Ligier team at the beginning in '97, the performance were very, very good. But as I said, it was a Benetton chassis. Don't forget that. Yeah. And building your own car is a different story. And so they hope to have a quick success, and this was not the case. So they were very disappointed. And I think from '99 onwards, they were thinking about quitting Formula One, not going on. And of course, when there is no motivation anymore and budgets are restricted, then forget about Formula One. In Formula One, you don't ask how much it costs, you just ask how fast you want to go. That's all.
I'm curious if, and looking back, anybody can look back and say we should have done this, should have done that. We see teams today like Haas sort of being super dependent when it comes to chassis, gearbox, things like that. Our previous guest explained that to us. But would you say that if you could turn the clock back to that period with Ligier/Prost, do you think Alain would have wanted to maybe somehow build a relationship with Benetton and just use their chassis every year? Do you think that would have been better, or
that would for sure have been better? But I mean, it was a bit limited with the rules because Formula One team has to be his own constructor. So running a chassis from another team is actually not very legal. Now it has been done with the GS45 for sure, but I mean, I think Alain didn't want to go that way. He wanted to have a French team, French engines, chassis designed and built in France and everything, which I respect. But it was not possible on such a short notice, that is for sure.
That is indeed true. Even though it only spent a short amount of time on the grid, Prost Grand Prix, if you look at its driver lineups, actually had quite a few really good and decent drivers. Guys like Alesi, Panis, Trulli, and even Heidfeld in later years. Yeah. Who do you think was the fastest out of all the Prost drivers that you got to see or you got to work with?
That's a very nasty question because, I mean, it's difficult to compare drivers with different cars. I mean, that's very, very difficult. For sure, I would say on a one lap effort, like qualifying, I think Trulli was a bit outstanding. That is for sure. Yeah. But they're all fast. Panis is fast, Alesi is fast. Even Heidfeld, who never won a Grand Prix, is a very fast driver. They are all fast. But I would say that the specialist of a one lap with new tires, sticky tires, is for sure Ciaron Trulli. That's why he made his car looking better than he was by putting it on the grid where it should not belong, And then in the race, he could not keep up that position, and they say, he's a good qualifying driver, but not a race driver. But that's because he was so good in qualifying,
Fair enough. I think we all agree with you, and we understand, these guys are all talented. And I think when it comes to qualifying, I think Trulli is well known to be a specialist. What I'd like to understand before we move on to the next section here is, again, back to '97, because honestly, it looked like Panis was driving so well, especially before his accident. I mean, would you agree with that? I mean, he really looked like Olivier was kind of like in the peak of his career in that period. Do you have any thoughts about that '97 season and specifically Panis's performance?
He was driving very, very well in '97. I mean, I think he could have won races probably when he would not have broken his legs in his accident in Canada. That is for sure. And I mean, he was very strong, very, very strong, I must say. But the car was also a little bit it was at Benetton from the year before, so it lacked a bit of aero development. The Mugen Honda engine was a very, very good racing engine for sure, but probably not as powerful as the Renault V10. It was a proper works engine. So I think he did very, very, very well that year, for sure. But yeah, I mean, he also suffered then the lack of quality of the 98 and the 99 cars, for sure. And yeah, that's Formula One. You mean you need to become a winner or a world champion. You need the driver, the car, and the team. You need everything on the right time.
Yep, absolutely. It's amazing. And I just wanted, before Nedzo asks his question about Sauber, I personally have said many times, and I don't think you'll care too much about this, Jacky, but I still think the 97 Prost is one of the most beautiful Formula One cars in terms of not just the Benetton chassis, but the color of the car and just the way it was. And Prost was always a very aesthetically pleasing team. I don't know if you guys ever cared about that, but generally all your cars are, I thought, very beautiful cars.
Yeah.
You know, so shame we didn't see more of the team because frankly I was a fan, you know. So
good. Now for me, a car is beautiful when it's fast.
yeah, there you go. Well said. Well said. Nedzo, did you want to move on to Sauber here?
Yeah, so yeah, moving on to Sauber, you were obviously still a chief engineer. Obviously Sauber's known as being like the model midfield team. They're always kind of in and around that mid area. How did Sauber differ both from Prost culturally, and how did your role differ as a team leader in that environment compared to Prost?
Well, yeah, Sauber was a completely different. You know, it's a Swiss team, the only Swiss team, and Peter Sauber, of course, had many, many years of experience as a team boss, starting with, you know, his wins in Le Mans with the Mercedes C1. Basically, in those days, it was Group C cars, I think, yeah. And so the team was well established. It was working quite well. Maybe they had a bit of difficulty to hire in engineers with Formula One experience because most of them like to live in England or Italy, not so much in Switzerland. And so there was maybe a little bit lack of experienced Formula One engineers, that is for sure. But it was a very well-structured team, I must say. I liked working a lot there. Peter Sauber was also a very nice guy. Was not an easy guy, but correct, very correct. Nice person to work with. Always very honest.
Yeah, and I think that really that's something we kind of that was the image of that team. Very straightforward, very honest. He was also a team known for bringing in phenomenal young drivers, Jacky, and one of them, you know, was Kimi Raikkonen. You know, the man, the myth, the legend. You know, you became a race engineer, I believe, for the first time in 2001, and you were paired with this 21-year-old who had no real single-seater experience apart from Formula Renault. And I'm just wondering, I mean, were you there at the test where Kimi kind of stunned everyone? There's that legendary story and got the seat. Did you know he was something special right away? I'm really referring to that famous story where Michael Schumacher apparently said that, watch this kid, he'll be a champion someday at Mugello. Any thoughts on this? Yeah.
This was in the year 2000 in Mugello, yes, in September. And I was there, of course, because I was engineering Kimi Raikkonen. I was his first engineer in that test and in the season after also. And yeah, Kimi was, how should I say? Well, first, you know, in the year 2000, we had at Sauber, we had Mika Salo and Pedro Diniz as racing drivers. And Mika Salo had an offer from Toyota. They wanted to pay 3 times more than we paid him, so he went to Toyota, which I understand. And Pedro Diniz, he stopped Formula One racing, so we need 2 new drivers. And Peter hired in Nick Heidfeld, who had a little Formula One experience with Prost team already, but also a lot of mileage because I'd been test driver for McLaren years before, from 97 onwards. So we had a lot of mileage with McLaren. Because in those days, you know, testing was unrestricted. We tested like 20 weeks per year minimum. And so we had Heidfeld, and then we did another driver. And my idea was to have Jenson bottom, because I knew Jenson had done his first season with Williams, but I know that Frank signed on Montoya to come in Formula One. So there was no place anymore for Jenson. But then I contacted the Robertsons who were managing Jenson, and they said that you're too late because he signed a contract with Flavio to drive the Renault car. So then I was without a driver. And the Robertson said, yeah, but we have this guy, Kimi Raikkonen, who is a very special talent and so on. So then I informed myself a bit in the karting world, because I know some managers of the big kart teams, and they know the drivers very well because they know them as a kid before they have lawyers and managers with them. So they know the real personality. And he said, yes. He said, this guy is quick and a good racer, not just quick on the lap, but also good in racing, overtaking, no accidents, nearly no accidents. So I convinced Peter Sauber to give him a test. And I must say, when we did the test in Mugello in September 2000, 12 months before that, so September 99, Kimi was still a karting driver, was not, not even racing cars yet. So it was really a bit special, but he did very, very well, for sure, very well. Because, I think it was the evening of after the first day of testing. So I was analyzing data with the other engineers, and somebody was knocking at the door of the motorhome. So I opened the door, it was Michael Schumacher, and he said, yeah, who is this guy who is testing for you? And I told him, Kimi Raikkonen. Yeah. And he said to me, he will be very, 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 very fast. He said, keep him. So I was convinced.
Wow, I'm speechless. That's amazing, Jacky. And I also just wanted to pick up on something you just said. And I apologize because your career is so prolific that even when we sent over the first questions, we had to fix some things. So you worked with Jenson at Williams. Did I hear that correctly? Like you were at Williams?
No, I didn't. What I did, I wanted, actually, when I was at Prost in 98 and 99, I was also looking into Jenson already. And I told Alain, I think we should give this guy a test because he's really, really, really very good. And Jenson had done that year Formula 3 in the UK with a French team from Serge Sonnet, who has been also an ex-Formula 3 driver and team manager of a team doing the British Championship. And Alain said to me, yeah, what did he do? So he finished third in the championship. I said, he only finished third in the championship. I mean, he's even not won a championship. I said, listen, Alain, that's because the Renault engine is not up to the Mugen engine and whatever it was, the Toyota engine in Formula 3. But the guy is really special. I know Serge Sonnet quite well, his team boss, and he told me he's really large above the average Formula 3 driver. So if you want to give him a Formula 1 test, you should do it. And
I think you have an eye for talent.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think they should have listened to you there. That's amazing. And it's funny how Jenson and Kimi's careers intertwined because they were managed by the Robertsons, like at one point. And there was some controversy there. Jenson has spoken about how he was very shocked to see Kimi show up in Formula One when the Robertsons had said that they would only manage Jenson. But anyways, that's neither here or there.
Yeah, no. But then that's how I convinced Alain. Because first he said, yeah, he was only 30. Alain said, you remember when you did the first year of Formula 3, you didn't win a championship. Yeah, but he was a Renault engine. Say, well, it's exactly the same. He's also the Renault engine. Say, the second year you won everything, but the first year I didn't win a championship. Yeah. Then he said, okay, bring him on. And then, so I arranged his first Formula 1 test with the Prost cars in Barcelona. But then I was already leaving the team to Sauber, And then because he was really doing very well, and I think Frank Williams saw that and he signed him up immediately for the year 2000. Yeah. But in 2001, then we could not have him, and then we signed Kimi, which I do not regret at all.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing though, just to hear all that. I didn't know about any of that. I think it's there was a lot of talent on the grid, but it's amazing how these things can change the course of history. Yeah. Because the Renault, the Benetton was a, and I say this respectfully, these are all brilliant engineers. That Benetton in 2001 was absolutely not a good car compared to the the
think it was-
Sauber, Sergio Vinland, great design, right?
Yeah.
It gave Kimi a chance to show his talent.
But I think the Benetton car in that year, 2001, was also due to their special architecture of the engine, because they made a V10 with 110 degrees or something like that. It never worked properly.
Okay, good point. Yeah, that's a good point. We can get to this in a minute. Before we go back into the cars, let's just talk about Kimi a little bit longer. We had one of his other race engineers on, and he said that Kimi's feedback was good right away.
Mm.
I imagine it might have been a bit different when he first joined Sauber. I mean, how did he describe car balance in those days? Was he good right away? And what were his strengths and weaknesses as a driver from your perspective in his rookie year?
Well, yeah, I mean, Kimi is not a big talker, but he just says what's important, which is basically what I like, because a driver who always tells me the story of his life, you don't know what is more important or less important. Kimi only says the important things, So, and let's say his first is also, obviously, I set up the car quite understeery, because that's easy to control, it's less dangerous, and Mugello is a quite fast track. And already after 2 outings, he said to me, yeah, Jacky, can you not reduce a little bit the understeer? So he wanted to, basically to have a more balanced car. And then also afterwards, he's only concentrating on the most important thing. He will say, in that corner, I tried everything, different lines, different type of braking into the corner and whatever. There is too much understeer. You have to do something about that. And I will gain 2 tenths there in that corner. And then you do something on the car and you will gain 2 tenths in that corner. You can see in the data. So he's very precise in where he has to gain the most lap time. And that is very important for a race engineer,
So, one of the reasons Kimi has been so popular is because he has a very distinctive personality and has been a man of few words. I remember when he first joined the grid, there was a lot of skepticism because he'd only been racing single-seaters for a bit over a year. But then, of course, his first race in Australia, he scores a point. There is a claim that he was asleep something like only 30 minutes before the race started. Is that true? Or
no, that is absolutely true, because I mean, like 20 minutes, 50 minutes before the pit lane opened, to put the car on the grid, I could not find him nowhere. So as a team manager, do you know where Kimi is? No, maybe he's to the loo, whatever. No, we couldn't find him. Then he went into the motorhome. We rented motorhomes over there because Australia, and he was asleep. So I woke him up, and then he said, I'm coming. So he was very relaxed about it. And also after the race, so like you said, he finished 6th, he scored his first point. So I told Kimi, what do you think? Your first Grand Prix, and you already scored a point. And then he looked to me with his blue eyes and he said, yeah, another 5 to beat. And he went away. That's all.
Amazing. It's just, you can't, it's so unique, to be like that.
Not another driver would jump in the air, point in the first race, but another 5 to beat, and then he went away. That was very special.
It's incredible. I guess that whole season was incredible because he just kept getting better and better. And because he had never seen most of these tracks or any of them, it was amazing to see someone so inexperienced do so well. And so I guess from your perspective, any thoughts on that? And specifically, what do you think his greatest race performance and quality performance was in his rookie season?
So maybe Canada was a very strong race. I think he finished 4th in Canada. I think Mika Häkkinen won the race, and then it was the 2 Ferraris, Michael and Rubens, and then Kimi. Was a very, very strong performance. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that race he outqualified Mika, and then in the race, I think Zonta, didn't he have some incident with Zonta in the race?
I don't remember exactly what happened, but anyway, he finished the race 4th, so it was a good result for sure with the Sauber car. And also that year with basically 2 rookie drivers, like Kimi was for sure a rookie, and Nick Heidfeld was still young in Formula 1. With the Sauber team, we finished 4th in the Constructors' Championship, which was actually a very good result for Sauber. Because the year before they were 8th, so we went from 8th to 4th place, which is a lot of TV money, of course. And I think they both did a very good job. and especially Kimi, because even Nick Heidfeld, who is very quick pedaler also, he told me, I've never seen a driver so quick on old tires. That was basically the strength also of Kimi, not just qualifying on new rubber with the extra grip, who hides a bit the unbalance of the car, but let's say once you racing, the tires getting older, the brakes getting hot, sometimes too hot, and then the car balance is less good. And then, let's say, as another driver will lose like a second a lap, you will only lose like 5/10 per lap, He's very, very fast on used tires, and well, he's very, very, very quick. A bit like Max Verstappen also. It's also very good in the race.
But that's amazing because that's also just his rookie season, and Heidfeld's already saying that. That just tells you the talent. And Heidfeld, like you said, Heidfeld's an amazing driver as well. I have a lot of respect for Nick Heidfeld as an enthusiast, but for Heidfeld to say like Kimi in his rookie year had this kind of talent on old tires, like you said, I think it speaks volumes of Kimi and probably how strong your team was that year. I thought it was an amazing team in 2001. So it's great to hear. Peter, did you have a question here about maybe Kimi and some of the other rookies? We can get to other topics like Helmut, Red Bull in a second, but I think you had a question initially, Peter.
Yeah, I suppose how would you say that Kimi compared to some of the other rookies, and I suppose just other drivers in general you had at Sauber in your time?
Well, the year after Kimi, I had another rookie in my car, which was Felipe Massa, and Felipe Massa, for sure, very fast driver also. But if you compare with Kimi, it's a different kind of person. Massa was a Latino, also in his approach, in his reactions, in his emotions, while Kimi was an Iceman, basically. He showed very little emotions, very concentrated on the job, and you could not disturb him from his main goal, which was as going as fast as possible with the car around the track. Well, Massa was easier to disturb, let's say, more emotional guy, more Latin guy, a Brazilian, of course, but also very, very quick. But let's say it's easier to work with Kimi than with Felipe because of the lack of emotions,
Yeah. In 2002, you became Sauber's head of track engineering. How did your responsibilities shift? Was there more organizational work? Were you less hands-on with car development?
A little bit less, maybe, but still, it is still a job where you manage both race engineers and all the data engineers on the track. So it's still a very, very strong engineering-biased work, So. I mean, he's like a race engineer plus, let's say, but he's still race engineering, basically. Yeah. And a bit more involved with the race strategy, of course. Yeah.
Around this time as well, Sauber was sponsored by Red Bull. Now, of course, they hadn't made their own Formula One team, but they had their driver program that Helmut Marko ran. Yeah. Were there any attempts by Helmut himself to be involved in driver decisions with Sauber, or were they not involved at all?
Well, yes, that's the year. I mean, I had some arguments with Helmut, especially that year in 2000, end of 2000, because Helmut had his Formula 3000 team sponsored by Red Bull, and one of his drivers had done already 2 seasons of Formula 3000. It was Enrique Bernoldi, Brazilian guy. So after I tested the first time Kimi Raikkonen in Mugello, Helmut was a bit upset and he said, yeah, but we are the main sponsor from Sauber. You should take Bernoldi as a driver for 2001. He has done 2 years of Formula 3000 and Kimi has done only 1 year of Formula Renault and blah, 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 blah. So at the end, I did a second test in Mugello with Kimi Raikkonen and Enrique Bernoldi to compare them both, And I must say, again, Enrique Bernoldi very fast. I mean, on a set of new tires compared to Kimi on a set of new tires, he was even like 500s faster, let's say, which is the same lap time. But then when I asked them both to do a long run of, let's say, 20 laps, then there was a big difference in the total lap time between Kimi and Enrique. Enrique didn't manage his tires, he drove like a madman during 20 laps, so his tires were falling down by the end of the stint, and Kimi was managing his tires over 20 laps properly, like you should do in a race. And so for me, the decision was made. Of course, it was not my decision, it was Peter's decision. But I did. Peter then chose Kimi above Enrique, and that, yeah, of course, Helmut Marko didn't like that. That's logical.
I mean, there was a rumor before we move on that, and I don't want to spread things if they're not true, but there was a rumor that Helmut thought like the cars were fixed or something crazy like that. He was probably furious. That's why he probably said that.
No, that's not true, because I was there, engineered them both. So I mean, the car
Exactly.
also identical. There was no
Yeah.
no fixed, nothing. And
It's
Enrique
just,
was the fastest Kimi on a new lap, on new laps, on the new tires. I mean, so that was not a problem. But for me, the problem was more if you ask them to do 20 laps and you see you add up the 20 lap times, and then you see that there is a difference of 8 or 9 seconds between the two. Yeah, then it's a lot, because a race is like an average race is 60 laps, 3 times 20 laps, 3 times 8 seconds is 24 seconds. Is a lot.
yeah. You know, there's a famous quote that Kimi actually made himself, where it was in 2013 or something. I was just looking at it, and he's like, many drivers can go fast over 1 lap, but to go quickly over 53 laps is a different story altogether. And it shows this is key, right? Like, it's not just about how fast you go, but you know how you can manage everything, all the variables, consistency over long stints. It's fascinating to hear that kind of confirmed from you, Jacky.
I mean, each good racing driver is a fast driver, but not each fast driver is a good racing driver. It's a different story.
Wow.
You understand what I mean?
That's an amazing quote. That's an amazing quote. That's one of my favorite quotes that I've heard about racing, Jacky. This is great. So, I mean, I guess what I'm also a bit curious about was, before we move on from Sauber and we go to Honda, I have a few more questions about Sauber, because it became like almost like a Ferrari B-Team at one point. You know what I mean? Did you see that happening when you were there, and like why did that happen? How did that happen? You know, at one point, Sauber was like literally using the chassis of the Ferrari car from the year before, like that 97 Prost was using Benetton chassis the year before. Same with Sauber, but like, did you see the team heading in that direction? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, difficult to say, but I mean, for sure, I mean, we used the Ferrari engine. At the beginning, only the engine. Then a few years later, we've used also the Ferrari gearbox, because it was allowed by the rules, technical regulations, the Ferrari rear axle. So if you use the engine and the gearbox and the rear suspension, why not copy the rest? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To do as good as possible. Yeah. Because I mean, the Ferrari car in those days were very, very competitive, with Michael and Rubens at the steering wheel. And so we tried to approach as much as possible their car design. It was not a Ferrari chassis for sure, because it's not allowed by the rules, but it was like a copy as close we could get within the regulations, let's say. Yeah.
There was that one year where I think Sauber used Bridgestones for most of the time that you were there, except the last year when you guys used Michelin's, I think, in 05, right? I'm always curious, before we move on, about tire switches. Was like, how much of an impact does that have when suddenly you have to use Michelin instead of Bridgestone? Was that just like a huge shift for the team, and what did the drivers say? Because I know Massa had only driven on Bridgestones before. I'm curious.
Yeah. No, the drivers were very impressed with the performance of the Michelin tire, for sure. I think they had an edge over the Bridgestone tires in those years. And for sure, as an engineer, you have to, each tire has its proper characteristics, which were quite different between Michelin and Bridgestone. So we had to redesign suspension geometry for using the Michelin tires, and also to redesign not only the suspension geometry, but also the setup of the car was quite different. Yeah, I must say. Yeah. Also, weight distribution was different. It was quite a big impact on how to engineer the car and design the car. The only thing that we regret in 2005 was the fact that the Michelin tire was a bit too much on the edge, and I don't know if you remember, but in Indianapolis, we all had to start the race, one lap and coming into the pits, and so only the 6 Bridgestone cars.
Well, what you're saying actually has taught me something already in this podcast, because that year the tires were on the edge. They had an incredible front end, and they also had to last the entire Grand Prix. And you already told us that Kimi was really, even as a rookie, good at making his tires last and going fast on old tires. And if you remember in 2005, I'm just switching the topic a little bit, Kimi was so fast that year.
Yeah.
And I think the regulations probably helped him a lot now that I'm listening to you, because I think it suited his strengths, huh?
Yeah.
But I'm curious to know, like, when you worked with the Michelin tire engineers, like, did they impress you? I mean, how did they compare to the Bridgestone ones? It was such an amazing time, because it just seemed like both tire companies were trying to outdo each other all the time, you know?
Yeah, it was a proper tire war, let's say. That's for sure. But they both Bridgestone and Michelin have very competent tire engineers. So they're both big companies. They know about what they're talking about. But let's say their strategy was a little bit different sometimes, in designing the tires. And sometimes the tire was better on one track and then on the other track. But I think at the end, especially 2005 and 2006, Michelin had the edge over Bridgestone. That is for sure. I think the two world titles from Fernando Alonso were also for sure due to his driving capacities, but also due to the tires.
Yeah, and for sure. I mean, that was an interesting year. So, and it's great that you had experience on both. Quickly on Massa, if I remember correctly, he obviously took that year off after his rookie year, where he was a test driver for Ferrari, and then he came back to Sauber the year after in 2004 with next to Fisichella.
Yeah.
Did you see improvement from him when he came back? I mean, how did you compare him?
I mean, he was, I should have said, he was already quick in his first year, 2002. Speed was not a problem, but he became a better racing driver. Like I said, between the good racing driver and the fast racing driver, I think that year in 2003, when he was a test driver for Ferrari, and you remember in those days, testing was unlimited. So he did 10,000s of kilometers with the Ferrari in Fiorano and Mugello and everywhere. I mean, he became for sure a much better racing driver. He became more confident in himself, in his abilities. Because before that, let's say when a driver was, let's say, when Michael with his Ferrari was faster than Felipe with the Sauber, Felipe thought, I have to find 1.5 seconds or 1 second a lap. It's not true. I mean, it's not only in him, it's also the car, you know. And he learned that by driving in the same car as Michael on the same day on the same track, that actually was nearly as quick as Michael or sometimes quicker. And so this gave him a lot of self-confidence. So when he came back after his test year with Ferrari, he was a much better racing driver. Yeah, sure.
It's amazing because Fisichella is an amazing driver too, and so he had a tough benchmark, and he did well, against Fizzy. It was a shame in some ways as well, though, because Massa coming in also meant that some other good drivers like Frentzen were no longer on the grid, right? And I thought Frentzen did a really good job in 2003, especially when he got that podium, right, in Indianapolis. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on Heinz's performance that year, and then that race where you guys got that amazing podium? And it was an amazing race. I recently rewatched it because Sauber got a podium in Indy.
Think Heinz-Harald Frentzen is also an extremely talented driver, like most of them in Formula One, but he was really a big talent, natural talent, but maybe was not working hard enough, let's say. It was not the same work ethic as a Michael Schumacher, let's say, or even a Nick Heidfeld. He was resting a bit on his laurels, on his talents, but he was very talented and very fast, for sure. Also a very special driver, because I remember, just to tell you a small story with him, we went to the Monaco race in 2003, it was, yeah. And in those days, free practice was on Thursday, not on Friday, Thursday. And the track, of course, on Thursday is always very dusty, very slippery. So I told Heinz-Harald, we do an outing to check if everything is right on the car, the cooling of the engine, the brakes, to see the ride height is okay at the end of the straight, not too low, not too high, temperature of the brakes, everything fine. And then we go on each 20 minutes, we do an outing of 5 laps, 3 time laps, plus an in and out lap. just to follow the track. Because if we change our setup all the time, then we are chasing the track, and at the end you end up with a system that is worth nothing. So I said, yeah, that's fine. And then so we went out with a few laps, everything was fine. 20 minutes later, another few laps. But after an hour, we were still like 22nd in the time table from the 24 car. And I said, Harold, is there any problem with the car? No. I said, well, what do you think there is wrong? I said, yeah, we are only 20th or 22 on the grid, on the timing table. Do you want me to push a little bit? Say, I would like you to push a little bit to see where the car is. And he went out and he pushed 2 laps and he was P4 on the timetable. No, that's Heinz Harold. He was so confident he could do it that he didn't need to show it, Just when I asked him.
That is amazing.
So
it shows his talent.
Yeah.
So I suppose another big driver you had around that time was Jacques Villeneuve, which I think for you would have been your first time working with a former champion. Of course, he was known. He had a very unorthodox kind of setup preferences, in particular things like the pedals. But I think also in 2005 he didn't really get on with the team very well. But what was it like having a former champion in the team?
Well, I mean, Jacques is a very nice guy. I like him a lot. And of course, with a massive experience, I mean, not only Formula One champion in 97, but also IndyCar champion. He won the 500 miles and everything. And so he brought a lot with his experience. But as you said, he was not feeling extremely well in the team. I don't know why, but okay, the car was also not a race winner. Maybe he was used to driving race winning cars. I don't know. But for sure, it was a good experience, but the results were not like hoped for, let's say. Yeah, that is for sure.
I guess one quick question that I had, Jackie, before we move on was, I hate to ask this about Kimi again, but like one thing I noticed about Kimi and all the teams he went to is he always wanted a really, really, really strong front end on the car.
Yeah.
Like he just wants that front to turn in immediately, and he'll deal with anything like the back end stepping out later. Was that something you noticed early on? Like he needs the steering to be a certain way, very specific with car setup. And how would you compare that driving style to, let's say somebody like Massa or Heidfeld, who it seemed like they like more understeer, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that before we move on.
Well, yeah, it's like that. Kimi was he hated understeer. All drivers hate understeer, but let's say he would, like you said, sacrifice the rear end to have no understeer. Even in his first test in Mugello, in Mugello you have 2 right-hand side corners, which are called the Arrabbiata corners.
Yeah, I love those cars.
Yeah, very fast corners. In your Formula 1 car is around 245, 250, the speed in those corners. And in his very first test, even there, the second day when we balanced the car a bit more to his liking, so basically reducing the understeer everywhere, in the Arrabbiata corners, he was like having like 45, 50 degrees counterlock on the steering wheel at 245 kilometers per hour. So I was a bit, felt very, very confident with that. And I told him, say, look, in the data, so you have oversteer in the high-speed corners, and say, well, should we not do something about it? Maybe reduce a bit the front end. No. Leave it like that. It's only a bit of oversteer. I don't care. Okay. And that's different with the drive, maybe like Heidfeld or Massa. They would say, oof, that's a bit too much, reduce a bit the front wing, and we'll accept a bit more understeer in medium speed corners to not cope with that. That's driver's preference. Yeah.
Amazing to hear. So moving on from Sauber, that was a really incredible segment. You moved to Honda, right? You joined Honda after Sauber, and you became director of advanced research.
Yeah.
So let's start off by asking, what was this role in the advanced research group actually tasked with? Was it regulation analysis, long-term aero concepts, early chassis work? Love to hear a little bit more about your initial role there before we move on.
Well, the advanced research team was basically a big part in Japan. because Honda wanted also that their Japanese engineers learned about Formula One chassis, not only about engines, chassis and gearboxes. And we had a number of projects running there. So I worked, let's say, like half time in the UK and half time in Japan. And they had a number of projects relating to the car of next year. So we, let's say, try to develop new ideas and see if they were worthwhile, testing it out in simulation, and then seeing if they were worthwhile to keep for the next year's cars. So it's basically next year's cars related, let's say, or the car of 2 years later. That's what the advanced engineering. But in the first year, so that's 2006, I went also to all the races, I think, because Nick Fry was the team boss in those days. He said, yeah, we need people with experience like you on the track and blah, 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 blah. And also Honda liked me to go to all the races. So basically I went to all the races and I engineered a bit, because in those days we had, sometimes we could run a third car with the third driver, which was Anthony Davidson in free practice. You remember? Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah.
what I did when I went to the race weekends, I engineered Anthony Davidson as third driver in the Friday practice, and then I overlooked the work of both race engineers, which were in those days Andrew Shovlin, who is now engineering director at Sauber at Mercedes Formula One team, was Andrew Shovlin and Jock Clear, I think, who is still at Ferrari. I think. Yeah.
That's a very talented team. Even Anthony Davidson, I thought he was very talented as a driver, and obviously the quality of engineers there speak for itself. I guess if we think about the way this progressed, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like Honda began work on that infamous 2009 chassis pretty early, right? In late 2007, since the new regulations about the diffuser height were known to the teams in October. So can you walk us through more about how this project started and how quickly it became clear that the car was something very different?
Well, what we basically did, so when the rules were known to the teams, I think it was October 2007. So the central part of the diffuser, which had until then a much higher expansion than the sides of the diffuser, so it was much higher basically. This was then the diffuser height would be the same from left to right over the complete width of the diffuser. And so what we did in the wind tunnel, we had still the 2007 model in the wind tunnel. We put a carbon plate under the central part of the diffuser so that it would be legal for the 2009 rules. And we lost, of course, massive amount of downforce in the rear. So you had to back off front wing to rebalance the car. So we lost even more downforce. And then I think we did this in the morning in the wind tunnel. And then at lunchtime, we were sitting together and said, But then, of course, because it was just a plate under the central part of the diffuser, you had this tunnel existing there. But the tunnel was not filled with any air. And then we were discussing, if we could feed the tunnel with air, would it bring some downforce? Yes or no? What do we think? So I think it would be, but how to do this? Because you cannot have holes in the floor. And the rules do not. But then if you read the rule book, they say if you have the vertical projection of the floor, so basically if you put yourself under the car, you look vertically to the floor of the car, you may not see any holes. But the floor is a stepped floor. So the sides of the floor and the central part of the floor, there's 50 millimeter step. So then we said, if in this 50 millimeter, we make some slots, you don't see them in a vertical projection, then it's legal. And then we can feed some air to this central part of the diffuser, this tunnel. So we tried this and immediately found a lot of downforce back. So that optimized the size of the slot and the position of the slot to the maximum rear downforce, so we could crank up the front wing again, and basically we were back to the downforce from before. So this was very interesting, of course, and so this was the end of 2007. So, and then 2008, Ross Brawn joined us at Honda, and so in January I explained also the concept we had for the 2009 car. But of course, we had to present it to FIA. So we went with all the drawings to see Nick Whiting and Charlie Whiting. Sorry, Nick is brother. Yes. Charlie Whiting, and I said, it's legally set, so you can go for it. And this was a very important thing because until 2008 included, with the central part of the diffuser with high expansion, so much higher. All teams had a high gearbox to have the maximum expansion from the central part. If you go from a low central part, like the rules said, you can lower your gearbox, which is better for the mechanical dynamics of the car. Of course, lower center gravity in the rear is always an advantage. But we kept going for the high gearbox, while all the other teams went for a low gearbox, because they didn't find basically what we found in the tunnel in 2007. And therefore, even when we came out with the car in 2009, people saw what we were doing, but they could not have this high expansion rate in this tunnel because their gearbox was too low. That's why the car stayed competitive nearly until the end of the season.
I mean, that is incredible to hear. I actually, I'm going to let Peter ask the next question here about Ross Brawn and such. Go ahead, Peter.
Because I mean, obviously that 2009 season with Brawn, it's called a fairy tale year because the team kind of rose like a phoenix from the ashes and suddenly won the championship. Yep. I mean, at the time when you found out the Honda were withdrawing from Formula One, what was it like for everyone thinking, we've built this amazing car which we know is going to be good, but we may not get to run with it at all?
You mean for Honda?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, for Honda, yeah. They decided, end of 2008, we had this subprime crisis in the USA. And so it was a bit of an economical crisis worldwide. And that's why Honda panicked and they said, we stop Formula One. Okay. So, which was basically a shame. But then I think in Berkeley, there were like 700 or 800 people working already. And so basically Ross Brawn took over the team from Honda for, I think, for a symbolic pound or something like that, and a very small budget to pay for the running of the car, basically, not for development anymore. Now, luckily, the car, there was no other team that was thinking about the same thing as we end of October, and the car was extremely competitive. Now, for sure, because Honda didn't want to deliver the engine anymore, Ross looked for another engine, so made a deal with Mercedes. And then we had to modify in January, February, the rear end of the chassis and the front part of the gearbox to adapt to the Mercedes engine. So that's why we were late in testing, winter testing. But then immediately the car was competitive, and so the story is known. I mean, so it was a very nice feeling, I must say, to have this car so competitive. Because I thought, honestly, if we think about this, people like Eder Nui for sure must have thought about it, and apparently not so. I'm surprised because he's a very clever man. So, but apparently he didn't thought about it early enough to build a car with a very high gearbox and a very high expansion on the center part. So that's life.
So you kind of answered this question already, but so you said you were in fact very surprised that people like Adrian Newey, all the other designers of all the other teams, didn't come up with a similar idea to you. How surprised were you for that? Because you came out and this Brawn car was all of a sudden just faster than everyone else, and it took everyone it took Red Bull at least like 2/3 of the season to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we were lucky that our first trial was with the old diffuser, so the 2007 type. We just put a plate under it and we saw this tunnel appearing, closed, of course. Maybe the other teams immediately made a wind tunnel model on the legal diffuser, let's say, without the central expansion. I don't know what the reason exactly is, because it's for sure putting the plate under the 2007 tunnel. We saw this expansion tunnel, and then somebody came up with the idea, but I can't remember who. He was, if he could feed this central part with air, would it bring downforce? Yes or no? We don't know. Let's try. So is maybe a bit of luck involved also, but anyway, it worked out, and I was really happy that have participated in a team that won the world championship with this car. Yeah, for sure, it's a nice feeling.
And you had a big role to play too, Jacky. That's what the listeners need to understand. You were really involved in this, and it's amazing to hear. Before we move on to HRT, I have a question. It may be controversial, but you're the best person to ask. And I ask it in an honest way, not in a way to just start spreading any rumor or anything. So there was a bit of a rumor at the time, and again, these rumors can be nonsense sometimes, that Ross Brawn had some input in the rules for 2009 in some way, or he he was involved in making those rules, and so that also helped with the design of the car. Is there any truth to this, or is this just like a malicious rumor? I just want to clear this up once and for all.
Honestly, I don't think that's true. And anyway, I mean, this 2009 car, the basic performance item of the car, the central diffuser, let's say, was designed without his knowledge, because he was not at Honda in those days. He was still because he joined Honda in January 2008, and then this was already designed. So I mean, I don't think he has something to do with it. No, honestly, I think it's just a rumor.
No, it actually helps us understand, because of what you said, that this project started really early. It's amazing, honestly.
Yeah.
So why don't we move to HRT? That was an incredible segment. We could talk about that all day. Peter, did you want to kick it off as the HRT specialist on our panel?
Yeah. So obviously with HRT, that's quite a change from Brawn. Did you have much in the way of expectations when you joined them, or were you not really that surprised when they were the slowest team in 2010?
Oh no, I was not surprised at all. Basically, my idea was after 2009 to do something else than Formula One, because I wanted to travel a bit less, let's say, spending a bit more time home. But then, because, as I said, end of 2008 with the subprime crisis, Honda stopped. During 2009, Renault decided to quit. BMW started to quit. I mean, Toyota decided to quit. So, and Bernie was afraid of losing too much teams. Of course, at the end, Renault became Lotus. Toyota disappeared completely. BMW disappeared, but Sauber brought his team back. So at the end, he only lost basically Honda and Toyota and BMW, but BMW stayed. Renault became Lotus, yeah. So, but he didn't knew this at the time, and he was afraid of losing 8 cars on the grid. And so he needed more cars on the grid, because he needed a minimum of cars on the grid to fulfill his contracts with broadcasters and things like that. So he pushed everybody to eventually start a new Formula One team. And Adrian Campos, he wanted to, in those days also, Max Mosley wanted to promote teams with a very small budget, like $45 million or $50 million per year, something like that. That never became the rule, of course. But budget capping came later on, but it's not 45 million, it's more like 145 million. And but Adrian started building his Formula One car with Dallara. So he asked Dallara to build a Formula One car with a Cosworth engine and a Hewland gearbox. And but then also due to financial reasons, the project stopped. And then Bernie picked it up, and he asked his friend Colin Collis to say, yeah, you have a team, because Colin ran Audi cars in LMP1 in those days. And he said, you have a team to run the cars. Can you not run the HRT Formula One cars? And then he called me up and he asked me if I would join the team. So actually, I wanted to do something else than F1. Yeah, but we need new teams and so on, and they need the people with experience, so you should do this. Okay. So then I went basically working with Colin in HRT F1 team to... But I mean, when first I put the Aeromap in my laptop, in my simulation program, and I simulated, let's say, a lap around Barcelona, and I compared with the Aeromap I had from my latest F1 car, which was the brown car. It was like 4.3 seconds slower than the brown car per lap. So I knew the car would not be very competitive. And on top of this, a Cosworth customer engine is not a Mercedes works engine. So I knew it would be very, very hard. But anyway, it was Bernie's will to have cars on the grid and to have them safely on the grid, because even if a car is 4 seconds a lap slower, it still is doing 300 kilometers per hour at the end of the straight. The driver is leaving the box out of the pit lane, he floors the throttle. It's still a dangerous thing, you have to engineer it properly to not create dangerous situations for the drivers, that is for sure. And that's why I was there, but I knew there was no budget for development, so there were no big hopes of nice results. But it was a good team. I think like in the past also the Minardi team, for young drivers to start Formula One and to get used to the Formula One environment without pressure. Because if you drive a car that is the slowest of the grid or nearly the slowest of the grid, nobody expects big results from you. Like Fernando Alonso started his career also with the Minardi, Giancarlo Fisichella also with the Minardi, Ricciardo started his career with HRT. So there is no pressure and you learn about the ropes of Formula One. And then you go to a more competitive car and you have less stress, let's say. So I think it's a positive thing to have teams like those teams. But for sure, there was no big hope for good results because there was no development. Basically, the chassis was built at Dallara. Then first year was a Cosworth engine in a Uran gearbox. It was nearly the only development was for reliability and safety, of course, if there was an unsafe situation. But this was not the case actually.
So as you've mentioned, their first car was built by Dallara. It was noted by some people that the rear wing and the barge walls were pretty much a carbon copy of those on the Brawn car. Did you have anything to do with that, or was that just all Dallara and that was a bit of a coincidence?
It was all Dallara, yeah. No,
right,
design,
okay.
No single part of that car, no, nothing.
Okay. But you were involved more with the design of the 2012 car, their final one. What were your main goals with that you were trying to get out of that car?
Well, the idea was, of course, the biggest lack of performance came from the aero, So the car, the L/D of the car was not very good, so lift over drag ratio. So the idea was to have more downforce for less drag. So basically, but again, there it was very difficult because there was no budget to have a wind tunnel model, no budget to do wind tunnel work. So it all was done in CFD, which is for me a very dangerous thing because CFD is for me complementary to the wind tunnel. Wind tunnel is experimental aerodynamics and CFD is theoretical aerodynamics, and they're both complementary, but only doing CFD is very dangerous. Always you have to check in the wind tunnel if what your calculations say goes in the right direction. And so we only did the car in CFD, which is for me very dangerous. And also it was not very, very competitive either. You say like it is, which was not a surprise to me. But okay.
Jacky, that's actually fascinating to hear. I never knew that, just doing it with CFD or the other way is makes that much of a difference. This is why we wanted to speak to you as well. Before Nedzo jumps in about the next phase, I'm just going to ask a bit of not a nasty question, but a question about the drivers at HRT. It's hard for them to shine, like you said, sometimes. There's no expectations. Do you have thoughts about them? Did any of them impress you more than the others? It'd be great to hear just briefly about, what you thought about some of the HRT drivers and if any of them you were impressed by.
No, some of them, of course, had reasonable F1 experience, like Tonio Liuzzi, a very quick driver. Christian Klein, also a very fast pedaler. But let's say the one who started his career with us was Daniel Ricciardo. And I must say, even if the car was not competitive, sure, but I mean, his rate of learning was very, very steep. So there you felt he had the talent to become a race winner in the proper car. That is for sure, which he became also afterwards. I think he won 8 Grand Prix or something.
That's great to hear. It's always remarkable to hear about the early days of some of these guys who went on to win races. I think, and so did you want to kick us off with the final segment here?
Yeah, I forgot to unmute myself for a second there. Yeah, so after HRT, you followed Colin Collers to WEC or WEC. How does a WEC team fundamentally operate differently to a Formula One team? What are the differences?
Well, I mean, it's quite a different philosophy, of course. Endurance racing and sprint racing like F1. Although I must say that the last 2 years, endurance racing is becoming more and more like a sprint race of 1,000 kilometers or 24 hours or whatever it is. But in the beginning, in those days, there was more design freedom in WEC than in F1. So that was quite interesting for sure. But again, I mean, the effort of Colin Collins in WEC, I appreciate a lot. He was not a proper works budget, you know what I mean? So, and then again, I mean, you're trying to beat people like Toyota and big car manufacturers as a privateer is extremely difficult. That's extremely difficult. And that's why also I did a few years of WEC, and then I decided to do something else. And I signed a contract with Audi, basically with APT, which is an Audi racing team. And I did with them a few years of DTM, the German Touring Car Championship. And then I went, then Formula E started, electrical Formula, which people like or don't like. I keep that in the middle. And I did the first 4 seasons of Formula E. And then I stopped basically working. Yeah. But
and that was with Venturi, right? And Formula E.
The first 2 years I did with Audi.
Yeah.
And then I did 1 year with Jay Penske, and then the last year I did with Venturi in Monaco, because it was close to me, and I'm living in Monaco, so it was easy for me to go to my office with a scooter.
That's beautiful. Sorry, did someone else have a question here that I want, or I can jump in? Because I wanted to really get your thoughts, Jacky, on engineering creativity in these formulas versus Formula One. Would you say F1 has more engineering creativity, or is it actually a case where nowadays some of these not junior, that's the wrong term, some of these other categories have more engineering creativity? What do you think?
Well, I think currently not too much, because I mean, every team becomes very like Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2, all the same chassis. So it's basically just race engineering you do, setting up the car, using simulation to find the best setup, and so on. Formula One, still you design your own car, and also in WEC you design your own car. But other formulas, they are a bit like IndyCar, everybody using the same chassis. So there is not too much design freedom in those categories. I think those are the most design freedom is really F1 and WEC for sure. Yeah.
Did F1 become more restrictive the longer you stayed in it? Because from the outside, sometimes it looks like the regulations restrict engineering creativity, even in F1, even from like the 90s until like, your years in HRT, for example. Did you notice a shift in Formula One? And do you have thoughts on that? Did you maybe prefer it the way it was, or did you think it went in a right direction when it comes to engineering creativity? Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, of course, it's true that the engineering creativity was more and more restricted during the years, which I regret. On the other hand, there were a lot of regulation changes that went into the good direction for safety, because when I started Formula One, we nearly had no crash tests. A carbon monocoque was weighing like 30 kilograms. Now it's like 50 or 55 kilograms. So for safety with the side impact structure, the front impact structure, the rear impact structure, the rollover hoops, lately the halo, it's all good things. Okay, it makes the car heavier, but for sure, for the safety of the driver is very important. Then, of course, also before 94, until 94, we had no stepped floor. We had just a plank under the floor as a skid, but there was no stepped floor. And then the ride height from the car became so critical. We had this big accident from Rubens Barrichello in Imola, and then Ratzenberg, who of course didn't survive his qualifying accident, and Ayrton Senna. And then they changed the rules to the stepped floor. So then it became more and more, because they had to restrict the car's performance, you know what I mean? Also, already from 93 to 94, 93 we still had this active suspension. The last year that Alain Prost won the championship in 93, and also this active suspension. When something went wrong with the active suspension, the car could become suddenly undrivable at high speeds, which could be very dangerous. So also they prohibited active suspension. So it's of course restricting engineering creativity, but it's also for the good reason, because if you would not limit anything, engineers would design cars that were undrivable for the human being. You know what I mean? We are like that. We only look for performance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just that kind of going off what you said, it sometimes would be nice to see the teams come with cars like the old days with 6 wheels,
Yeah,
or with different tire manufacturers. I think that's exciting,
yeah,
we like to see that. I mean, what do you think? I think it'd be exciting.
yeah, for sure. I mean, we like design liberty for sure, and it is less because you see also like, especially if the rules are the same for a few years. This year we saw often in qualifying like 15 cars in the same second, which is in the past impossible. In the past we had if the first 3 rows were within the same second, it was already very good. And now you have like 8, 9 rows in the same second. So, and that's also because of the restrictions in the technical regulations, of course. The cars become more and more equal in terms of ultimate performance. So then, especially in qualifying, when you put new rubber on the car, the extra grip hides a bit the imbalance of the car, so the imperfections of the setup, and so they nearly do all the same lap time. Of course, in the race, they're different, and the imbalance creates more and more tire degradation on the car, which is not well balanced, and then the lap time difference becomes bigger. But in qualifying, a lot of time, 10, 15, sometimes 20 cars in the same second is incredible. Huh? All different teams.
No, that's a really good point. I'm curious, have you been keeping up with the 26 regulations that are, obviously going to be so different? And if so, do you have thoughts on those regulations? Do you think that's going to improve the racing? Do you think it's unclear? I'd love to get your take on the new regulations next year in Formula One.
Well, I have not read the regulation book from the FIA, but from what I've seen, well, is a big change in terms of chassis design, which is interesting for the engineers for sure, but also a big change in terms of power supply, let's say the engines, because when I understand well, it will be like 50%, let's say 500 horsepower from a thermal engine and 500 horsepower from the electrical engine. But the thing is, okay, that means in a qualifying lap, you can use 1,000 horsepower, but in the race, you will never be able to charge up your battery under braking enough to have 1,000 horsepower on all laps. So in the race, you will have less power than in qualifying, that is for sure, which is already the case now a little bit, because, and then it will be also, I think, another part of racing will be the energy management, which is already the case. I learned that in Formula E, because in Formula E, let's say, if you speak now, not with kilowatt hours, but in fuel, if we say you need 3 kilograms of fuel for a qualifying lap, and then the racers say, now you have only 2 kilograms of fuel. The race is 30 laps, you have only 60 kilograms of fuel. So you can only race with 2 kilograms per lap. And when you go flat out, you need 3 kilograms per lap. Then you have to learn on the simulator how to do the quickest lap time with a limited amount of energy. And I think this will also become a strategic point in Formula One, I guess.
That just throws a whole new variable, doesn't it? I mean, that's like something that all the drivers are going to have to learn.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
I guess we can move on to the final segment here. I know, you said you have until like 1600 your time, UK time anyways. So I don't want to keep you over that unless you have a little bit more time. But let's start off with, in all of your career, what was the greatest race that you engineered or were a part of?
Well, one of those for sure that gave me the most satisfaction was Budapest 2006. I don't know if you remember that one. It was Jenson Button's first race win.
Oh yeah,
which was already a satisfaction for me, for sure. But also because in those days you had in Formula One, you had Honda and also you had Toyota. And the biggest thing between them was not who will win first time the World Championship, but who will win the first Grand Prix as a works team, So, and there was only one race in the whole season where the president of Honda visited us during the Grand Prix weekend, and this was in Hungary in 2006, and we won that race. So that was really a very, very high satisfaction. And it was also not an easy one because, it were mixed conditions in the race. Jenson had a problem in qualifying. He qualified only 14th, I think, or something like that. And then he won the race in a proper way. So he drove amazingly. It were also his conditions. The mixed conditions Jenson was really unbeatable in that kind of conditions. And I think he was the one I like the most.
I mean, that race was amazing. Yeah, I think Jenson made a reputation for being very good in these mixed conditions for whatever reason. But it was also interesting because I'd love to just go a little deeper because Kimi had his incident in the race with Liuzzi, so he retired, and then it was Alonso and Button, and for a while there, it looked like Fernando might be able to win the race but he had he had timed his pit stop in a way where it wasn't like a sure thing he would still win, like before he retired with that faulty wheel. I think most people said it could be either Jenson winning this or Fernando. I don't know if you have thoughts on that. How do you think that race would have gone if Alonso had not, gone off into the barrier because of a loose tire or whatever? Do you think Jenson still could have won that race?
I think he could, because during the pit stop, what we did, the rear tires were dead, but the fronts were still very good. And what we did, we only changed the rear tires. And I think the other teams changed the four tires. And then you had the first 2-3 laps some massive understeer, to build up the heat in the tires because the track was still very slippery. And I think we keep the front tires the same. They were still very, very hot. New rear tires for maximum traction. And I think it gave him the edge, honestly. And also his driving, of course, because he drove brilliantly, I must say, in those conditions. It was really, I think he deserved that one.
Yeah, I do too. Why do you think Jenson was so good in those conditions? Do you have any ideas why? It was odd.
It's difficult to say, but he has a very special driving style. He's a very clean driver, like they say, a bit like driving style of Alain Prost, Jenson, he comes in and he said, I have massive understeer. You look in the data, you don't see any understeer. And then, I said, I feel it, it's coming. See? And then he goes out again, and then he really, when he has understeer, he's turning the wheel like half a turn more to show you see that I'm understeer now, but I don't have to do this. I feel it coming. He has a very fine feeling for the car balance. And of course, in those conditions, for changing grip of the track with very low grip sometimes, I think this kind of feeling is very important, because if you overturn the wheel sometimes, you're losing grip power, and he can extract the maximum grip of the tire in those very tricky conditions due to his anticipating feeling of the car balance.
But his natural car balance, like if you compare it to somebody like Kimi, for example, or any of the other drivers you worked with, probably had a little bit more understeer naturally in the setup, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so probably in those conditions, it gave him some margin to also think about and anticipate like what the corner, because he was clearly amazing in those conditions. I even remember Indianapolis in 2003. He was leading before his Honda blew up. And then obviously the win in Hungary 06, countless other races. So it must have been nice to win with him after you had that kind of feeling that he was going to be a superstar at Prost. That must have been a beautiful moment for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, all that together gave me a happy feeling, for sure. I know that Ron Dennis thought he should have won the race with Kimi, I guess, but
I was a Kimi Raikkonen fan, so I was really angry after that race. But when I look back, it was an amazing race. So thank you for sharing that. Actually, there was one question that we wanted to ask earlier, and we didn't. So maybe we ask it now, and then I'm going to hand it off to the guys for the remaining questions they have. Indianapolis 2005. What are your thoughts about that weekend? Was this something that you think could have been avoided? Do you think that the tires truly were dangerous? That yes, there was no way any of the teams could have run on them. It wasn't just a Toyota problem. It was everyone having an issue. We just, you can answer this the way you want to answer it. I mean, what are your thoughts on that weekend?
Well, I think it's a shame for sure for the teams and for the public, for sure, because they only saw 6 cars driving a Grand Prix. But I think what we propose to do is, because the tires were suffering in the banking, And the banking in Indianapolis is flat in F1 car, but the loads on the rear left tire are so high that you have some kind of wave forming in the tire, and that brings a lot of energy in the tire and made the construction of the tire explode. And what we could have done, I think, is when you come out of the infield, before going into the banking, to put there a chicane. This would have been a solution, absolutely, which has been proposed to FIA, but for whatever reason that I ignore, they refused to do this, because otherwise you would have done a normal race, for sure.
Okay, that is fascinating. So you actually still think with a chicane that the tires might have been okay if the chicane was there?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Because it was the high speed, high load banking that destroyed the rear tires. Yeah. So
okay, that's incredible to hear.
Mm.
Okay, Nedzo, did you want to carry it on with a question about Jacky's career?
Absolutely. So we talked about your greatest race, or the race you most liked to the race you most liked throughout your career. What was your favorite role in terms of your favorite working role across your career, would you say?
Well, I like engineering cars for sure. So race engineer is a nice job. Also engineering director, because it's basically the same. You only manage the 2 race engineers, but you're still very much involved with the drivers and the setup of the car. Yeah, I'm basically race engineer is for me a very nice job if you like motor racing and you're an engineer for sure.
Thank you.
And the final question, what advice would you give to any new kind of up-and-coming engineers entering motorsport today?
Well, it depends a bit what kind of job they want to do, of course, because, I mean, the teams are so big nowadays. They use a lot of engineers who are not working on the track. You have design engineers doing structural calculations using finite element method, for instance. You have engineers doing aerodynamical calculations using CFD. You have electronic engineers, software engineers. So that's all home-based jobs. If you want to do this kind of job in a Formula 1 environment, then eventually you can apply immediately after you obtain your degree, for sure. If, on the other hand, you want to work on the track side, like a race engineer or whatever, then it's a bit difficult. I would say then starting straight from university is nearly impossible, because you need track experience. In the past, you could have learned your track experience in an F1 team, because testing was unlimited. So you had 20, 22, 23 weeks of testing per week. So young engineers started as a data engineer in the test team, learning their ropes, hearing the principal race engineer talking to the driver replies, and they could learn their track experience during testing. But testing is now so restricted that you cannot learn anymore. And in that case, if you want to become a race engineer or something like that, working on the racetrack, the best thing is following a career like a driver. You start, let's say, working with a car team, and you go to Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2, and then you end up in Formula 1, because you need the experience. You cannot learn only in books and from science how to engineer a car. There's also this human aspect involved, and a lot of things who are really important to learn on the track, on the side. So it depends a bit what kind of job you're looking for.
That's really good to know. Jacky, I have, I guess, one final question for you before we do anything here. The final part is that first question is, by the way, who was your favorite driver or team growing up in motorsport? Just love to hear like your childhood. Did you support anyone in that sense? And then finally, what are you up to these days? Anything you want to let the audience know? Would you ever consider taking another motorsport role in Formula One? Just love to hear your thoughts on those two questions before we close it out.
Well, when I was, let's say, a student, and I was interested in motorsport, of course, in those days it was not broadcasted like today. So, but let's say one of my favorites in those days was Niki Lauda. And I learned to know him afterwards, of course. So I knew Niki quite well, because he had this kind of approach also of scientific approach, a bit professor style approach, like Alain Prost, very high discipline. And and became 3 times world champion. So it's not nothing, even if he got this huge accident in 76. So that was actually a bit my example of how a race driver should be, Now there were others also very professional like him. I think one of the first one was Jackie Stewart, I think, and then Niki Lauda, and then Alain Prost and others. And but your second question was, would I like to work again in Formula One, or what is the question actually?
Yeah, I mean, would you like I mean, what are you up to these days? And would you like to, would you ever consider working in Formula One again if you, had that opportunity, or is that something that, is a closed book for you, because you've achieved so much, obviously. So just wondering, yeah.
To answer the question, I think is a bit of a closed book for me, because honestly, I mean, you have to leave this to the younger guys. I mean, I'm 70 years old. I will be 71 in the 11th of January, so not far away. And I think this is something for younger people. I mean, and also,
The schedule now is intense, isn't it? It's way more intense as well.
Yeah, but I must say, in the days I started F1, we had like only 16 Grand Prix per year, but we had like 20 to 25 weeks of testing per year. So basically, I remember in 98, I was engineering director at Prost, but I engineered also Olivier Panis because we couldn't hire any race engineering for him. So I did all the testing, all the races. I spent 43 weeks on the track in 1 year. So it's only 9 weeks I was not on the racing track. So I mean, it was also hard, And what was much harder in those days was the race weekends, because it was only, I can't remember which year, they decided to apply this post-qualifying park for me, So you can't change the seat of the car anymore after qualifying. But before that, in my early days in F1, we tested on Friday, free practice 1, free practice 2 with a race car. Friday night, we built a qualifying car with a qualifying engine, a qualifying gearbox, a qualifying wiring loop to gain like 20, 25 kilos, to put then 25 kilos ballast under the car more to make the lower center of gravity. This was used on free practice 3 Saturday morning and qualifying 12 laps was in those days only. And then Saturday night, we built the game back to a race car, engine, gearbox, wiring loop, everything. And Sunday morning, 8 o'clock, we had a warm-up. You know what I mean? So we didn't sleep a lot in those weekends. And nowadays, once they change this rule, it's much nicer. That is for sure. It's much nicer. Now, of course, the racing schedule is very heavy, but there is nearly no testing. Now, I must say also, in the days that testing was unlimited, the big teams started to build up separate test teams. And then I went only to one test on 2, let's say, because you could not do 25 tests and 20 races. It was too much. But there was always somebody from the race team who went also to the test tracks. One person, one or 2 race engineers, let's say. But I think, no, I mean, all this traveling and no, I've done enough. I like racing a lot. I miss the adrenaline of the race weekend, that is for sure. But all the things around has been enough. I leave this to younger people.
Can't blame you. You've had an amazing career. Nedzo, did you have a final question here?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. I think one final question that I had, Jacky, this is the final one, is there a driver that you wish you had worked with that you didn't have a chance to work with?
Well, maybe yes, but to start with, I was lucky to work with a lot of very, very, very good drivers in my life. That is for sure already a blessing. But maybe Michael Schumacher, yeah. I would would like to work with him. Yeah, sure. I don't say he's the biggest one, because it's difficult to compare drivers in different periods with different cars. But I think I would like to work with him, yeah, for sure.
Why would that be? Is it because you've talked about these calculating these professor drivers? Schumacher was kind of down that road. Is that why you'd say that? And he was kind of the big guy in that realm who you didn't kind of get to work with?
Yeah, I mean, he's well, I to be honest, when we worked with Sauber with the Ferrari customer engines, they had all our data, of course, but we have the engineers of Ferrari looking after our engine, and they also have the Ferrari data. So officially, he was not allowed, but in reality, I looked also at Michael's data, his chassis data. You know what I mean? And I could compare it with my data, with Kimi or Heidfeld or Frentzen or whoever. And well, the way he approached his way of driving, his setup, everything is something that I liked. I think I could have worked well with him, I think.
Thank you.
Well, I think you also would have worked well with him because you had an incredible career, Jacky. You know, just even listening to you and listening to your experiences, it's like a treasure trove of knowledge. And, you know, this was simply incredible for us. It means the world to us. We would love to bring you back in the future. And we're so grateful for your time. You're welcome back anytime, Jacky. So thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. We're on YouTube and Spotify, and you can find us on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. If you become a channel member, you can get access to bonus content and behind-the-scenes clips, and you'll join our current members, Spadgeman, AJLB Gaming, Javad Amadov, Oscar Vagland, F1 Luca, TRL Martin, Burak Shoshkun, Kittel Bezel, Elizabeth Hearn, Chris Adair, Blue Guy, and Lysenko. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.